the outward actions. But sin is also internal. It's inside of us. And it has to deal with things that aren't merely external actions. So he mentions that, one, it comes out of the heart of man. Evil thoughts are the number one thing on the list. A devout Jewish person would say that an evil thought is not a sin. Or I would say some evil thoughts are not sins. Because they are not outward actions. You have not broken any laws. Okay, so it's a very different way of thinking. And Jesus, time and time again, is trying to get them to understand that sinfulness is not just outward actions, but it's also our inward heart, our inward love of things, in particular, or hatred for things, that come out. So envy, slander, pride, foolishness. Well, I guess slander is outward. But envy, pride, and foolishness aren't necessarily outward things. Coveting is not necessarily an outward thing. In fact, that's a difficulty in the Ten Commandments. How is coveting an outward thing? This seems very much to be an inward thing. So the Old Testament laws that deal with these defilements, people find themselves in these states. And we ask ourselves the theological question, and Pastor and I were having this conversation this week. When you ask theologically, why is God giving these laws to Israel? What is he trying to get them to discern? What is he trying to get them to notice? And what it seems like he's trying to get them to notice is our sinfulness is in us. It's part of who we are. It's part of our body. It's part of our mind. It's both our immaterial and our material part of us. We are completely infused in sin. And it's not just a matter of, well, if I keep all of the laws, then I can enter into the presence of God because I'm holy. Well, actually, you're still not holy, right? So if you remember, we have when we talked about Hebrews, you have the tabernacle, you have the holy place, you have the Holy of Holies. And this is the problem, right? If you remember from all the way back to Genesis, what's the problem? How does a holy God have a relationship with sinful man? How do you reconcile that? And so in the Old Testament, you have the tabernacle, you have the Holy of Holies, or the holy place and the Holy of Holies inside of that. And so you've got the Holy of Holies, the holy place, so the tent. You've got the tabernacle, surrounded by the Levites, surrounded by the people of Israel who are in a state of quote-unquote holiness. And then outside of the camp, you have this other group of people who are still part of the covenant. They haven't broken the covenant, but they can't even approach the camp. They are now outside the camp, trying to get back in so that they can even get closer to the point of where they can approach the Levites so that they can bring a sacrifice that someone can offer on their behalf. How do you have God in the midst of his people, a holy God in the midst of all of his people, none of whom are holy? Every single one is a sinner. So there's a built-in problem. And I think some of these laws, and the reason that the sin offering is required for them, is they're there to point out what Mark 7 is pointing out, what Jesus is pointing out to them. Your defilement goes far deeper. It goes all the way to your very heart. So what's the great commandment? Love the Lord your God with all of your heart, soul, mind, and strength. That the religion that they were supposed to have was very much an internal one, which we did talk about at some length in Hebrews. So I think Mark 7 here is a good passage. It kind of brings us all the way around for that. Yep. Yeah, Hebrews 13. Well, we're expound on Hebrews 13. We'll probably have to refer to you to the recording on that. But what week was that? But we did talk about this a little bit because some people, it changes where they think Jesus was crucified. The bodies of those animals whose blood is brought into the holy places by the high priest as a sacrifice for sin are burned outside the camp. And this is the disposal of sacrifices. There's a lot that we could say about that too. But anyway, so Jesus also suffered outside the gate in order to sanctify the people through his own blood. So it's referring to Jesus as the sin offering. We didn't talk about what a sin offering is, but the fact that they are required for these three things that are mentioned in Numbers 5, verses 1 through 4. I take those three things to be the case laws in which sin offering is required. The other cases where only water is required, there doesn't seem to be any indication that those people have to be put outside the camp. They're different because in the camp is the Old Testament wilderness wanderings. The gate is the fixed city of Jerusalem where you have the temple. So a lot of these laws change once the people are in the land, because now there's no outside the camp. That changes. So it becomes outside the city walls. Because in the if you go to Jerusalem, there's a chapel or a church that's built. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre is inside the city walls, and a lot of the many Protestants will say they found Golgotha outside the city walls in this other area because of Hebrews 13. But there is one other location that it could be that's outside the gate, but not necessarily where people say that Protestants normally go to say where it is. But I don't have a problem with where they say that it is. As long as you don't go and worship the ground or look for relics. Any other questions I can't answer? Right, your faith is what saves you, and that's true in all dispensations, and that's one of the big areas that the Jews were misunderstanding. They thought that if they just kept all of these things, they would be holy, but our sin problem goes much deeper than that and needs to be rooted out by something completely different than just obedience. All right, well, you'll have to wait a few weeks and we'll finish up the catechism. Cliff Hamer, come back for that. Yep. I guess I'll see you guys in 3 weeks. I don't know what Pastor's doing for Sunday school for the next 2 weeks. I'm sure it'll be great. I have no doubt. that it'll be great. So, John, would you like to close us in prayer today?